The auctioneer's hammer came down hard, and the whole crowd turned to stare at the woman standing near the fence. She had just paid good money for the ugliest horse in the yard, a blind mare with cloudy eyes and a coat full of burrs. "Sold to the widow," the auctioneer shouted, and a laugh ran through the men standing around the pen. Martha Coyle did not laugh. She walked straight past the men, past their smirks, and put her hand on the mare's neck. The mare flinched. Martha did not pull back. "Easy, girl," she said, soft and low. "Nobody's gonna hurt you here." Behind her, a man spat into the dirt. "Wasted your money, Martha. That mare's blind as a stone, good for nothing but the boneyard." Martha did not turn around. "She's good for something," she said, "just not what you think." The men shook their heads. One of them, a rancher named Hollies, walked up close, his boots kicking dust onto her skirt. "Your husband's barely cold in the ground," he said, "and you're out here throwing away his money on broken horses. Folks are starting to talk, Martha." "Let them talk. They're saying you've lost your senses. Grief does that to a person." Martha finally turned to face him. Her eyes were tired but steady. "Then let them say it." She walked the blind mare toward her wagon, and the crowd watched her go, some laughing outright, some just shaking their heads at the sad, foolish widow. Nobody offered to help her load the mare. Nobody needed to. Martha did it herself, slow and patient, talking the whole time in a voice too quiet for anyone else to hear. The next week, she came back to the auction yard again. This time she bought a stallion with a leg that had healed crooked, bent at an angle no sound horse should stand on. The kill buyer, a heavy-set man named Griggs, laughed out loud when she raised her hand to bid against him. "That horse can't even run straight," Griggs said. "You sure you want him, ma'am?" "I'm sure," Martha said. "Suit yourself. More money for me either way." Winter passed, and then another. Martha still walked out to the barn every morning before sunrise, her breath fogging in the cold, her hands raw from hauling water and hay. The blind mare no longer flinched at her touch. She would nicker softly the moment she heard Martha's boots crunch in the snow, turning her head toward the sound like she already knew who it was. The mustangs had changed too. They no longer scattered when a wagon rattled past or when thunder rolled over the hills. They stood close together, ears turned the same direction, watching whatever needed watching. Martha had not broken them the way other ranchers broke horses, with a rope pulled tight and a whip cracked hard. She had simply waited. She let them come to her in their own time, one slow step at a time, until trust grew where fear used to live. "You're gentling that whole herd," said old Ezra, a neighbor who sometimes rode by to check on her. He watched a young mustang lean its head against Martha's shoulder. Never seen the like of it. "They just needed somebody to believe they were worth the trouble," Martha said. Ezra shook his head, not unkindly. "Still don't understand it, but your horses look better fed than half the counties." Word spread slowly, the way it does in small towns. A rancher named Prout rode out one afternoon, turning his hat in his hands the way men do when they are about to ask for something they are embarrassed to want. "Heard your colts don't spook," he said. "Heard they'll stand through gunfire without bolting." "They will," Martha said. "I might want to buy a pair come spring, if the price is fair." Martha almost smiled. "Funny, last year you called me a fool for buying them." Prout looked at his boots. "Man can be wrong, Martha." But not everyone had changed their tune. At the saloon that same week, Hollies leaned against the bar, laughing loud enough for the whole room to hear. "Crazy Martha got lucky is all," he said. "Any fool stumbles into a good herd once in a while, with easy weather and soft grass. Real ranching is proved in trouble, not in a gentle season." The men around him nodded and laughed along, clinking their glasses, certain they were right. Outside, the wind had begun to shift. 2 dry summers in a row had thinned the deer and rabbits in the high country, driving the hungry things down from the hills earlier than usual that year. Nobody in the saloon was thinking about coyotes that night. Nobody was thinking about foals sleeping unguarded in a dark pasture, or about which ranch might be tested first when trouble finally came looking for something to kill. The night had no moon. Clouds sat low over the ridge, and the wind carried nothing but cold. In the near pasture, Martha's new foals slept close to their mothers, small and soft-legged, too young to run far or fast. Up on the ridge, shapes moved through the sagebrush. Coyotes, 8 of them, maybe 9, thin from 2 dry summers with little to eat. They came down low and quiet, the way hungry things move when they mean to kill. The blind mare heard them first. Her head snapped up before any other animal stirred. She could not see the shapes creeping through the dark, but her ears caught what human ears never could: the soft crunch of paws on dry grass, the low panting breath of something hunting. She screamed, high and sharp, a sound that tore through the quiet pasture and woke every horse at once. The mustangs did not scatter. They ran together fast and closed into a tight circle around the foals, just like they had learned to stand together through every hard winter before this one. Their eyes rolled white with fear, but their legs held steady, hooves planted, bodies pressed close, forming a wall of muscle and bone between the coyotes and the young ones inside. At the weak point in the fence line where a coyote might slip through, the old stallion stood his ground. His crooked leg could not carry him fast, but it held him firm. He struck out with his front hooves again and again as a coyote darted close and snapped its jaws. "Get back!" Martha's voice cut through the dark as she ran from the house, lantern swinging wild in one hand, an old shotgun in the other. Her nightclothes caught on the fence rail. She did not stop to free them. She tore loose and kept running. By the time her lantern light reached the pasture, most of the fight was already over. A coyote yelped and bolted back toward the ridge, favoring one leg. The others followed, melting into the dark the way they had come, empty-jawed. Martha stood at the fence, chest heaving, lantern shaking in her hand. Around her, the mustangs still stood in their tight circle, ears pinned, breathing hard. Inside that circle, every foal stood on trembling legs, alive. The old stallion turned his head toward her, blood on one shoulder where a coyote's teeth had caught him. He did not run to her. He simply stood steady, the way he always stood, as if nothing about that night had been anything more than expected work. Martha lowered the shotgun. Her voice came out rough, barely more than a whisper. "Good," she said, "good, all of you." Behind her, back toward town, no one was awake yet to see it. No one yet knew what had happened in that dark pasture, or what it would mean once the sun rose and the whole county came riding out to look by sunrise. Word had already started moving through the county, the way news does when it is too strange to keep quiet. A boy riding to school had seen the torn-up ground near Martha's fence line. He told his father. His father told the men at the feed store. By noon, wagons and horses were coming up the road toward Martha's ranch, kicking dust behind them. They found Martha out in the pasture, cleaning a shallow bite wound on the old stallion's shoulder. The blind mare stood close by, calm now, her ears still turned toward every small sound. Not one foal was missing. Not one was badly hurt. Hollies was among the men who rode out. He stood at the fence, looking at the churned-up ground, the drag marks in the dirt, the fence post scarred where hooves had struck again and again through the night. "Coyotes came down off the ridge," Martha said, not looking up from her work. 8 or 9 of them, best I could tell." Holly said nothing for a long moment. Then he looked at the mustangs, still standing close together even now, still watching the tree line out of habit. "Your horses did this," he said, not a question. "They did," Martha said, "the ones nobody else wanted." Prout stepped forward, hat in his hands again, same as before. "Ordinary horses would have scattered," he said quietly, "left the foals alone in the dark." "Mine didn't scatter," Martha said. "They learned better a long time before last night." Nobody laughed now. Nobody called her crazy. The men who once mocked her at the auction yard stood quiet at her fence, looking at a blind mare who heard danger before anyone else could, and a crooked-legged stallion too, broken down for a killer's few dollars, who had held a fence line alone against snapping teeth. Martha's brother-in-law came late that afternoon, his hat pulled low. He stood a long while before he spoke. "I told you you'd starve by spring," he said. "Told you buying broken horses was foolish." Martha kept working, not unkind, just steady. "I remember." "I was wrong." He looked down at his boots, then back up at her. "Would you sell me 2 colts, whatever price is fair?" Martha almost smiled. "I'll think on it." Word spread fast after that. Ranchers who once laughed behind her back now rode out just to shake her hand, or to ask quiet questions about how she gentled a herd instead of breaking it. Nobody used the words "crazy Martha" again, not where she could hear it, and mostly not at all. Martha never gloated over any of it. She only said what she had believed all along, back when grief and hard luck made her an easy target for a whole county's laughter, that a creature nobody wants is not the same as a creature with nothing left to give. Sometimes what looks broken is only unproven. And sometimes, when real trouble finally comes down from the hills in the dark, it is not the finest horse in the county that saves you. It is the one everyone else was ready to throw away. She paid him $3 more than his offer, just to make certain he could not outbid her, and led the crooked-legged stallion away while the men behind her muttered about grief-mad widows and money thrown down a well. Her own brother-in-law rode out to her ranch that same evening, hat in his hands, his voice careful like a man talking to someone sick. "Martha," he said, "you'll starve by spring buying horses nobody wants." Martha kept brushing burrs from the blind mare's coat, not looking up. "Maybe," she said, "or maybe I'll see something you don't."